Well, hello. This is another devlog for my game engine that I'm creating, my relative roguelike game engine. Today, I'm going to practice my speaking. I did Toastmasters for a number of years, and that was a while back. I've gotten out of practice, and I really want to be more intentional with this video at least. Maybe it'll see, you shouldn't say maybe this will get me in the habit. I'll be a better speaker on the videos going forward. Maybe I'll hate it because I have to be more intentional with each word, and that takes effort. We're going and on and so forth. Doesn't take effort. It's more natural. But we'll find out. We'll see. Improvement. So let's get started on the devlog. This is what I'm going to go over today. I did a midweek devlog, and so this is a shorter number of days that I'm going over. But let's get started, see where we are. On the 8th, caches for three.js context. I spent way too much time with the type system. This is an issue, I would say. It's not, at this particular moment, it's unhelpful for me to be battling the type system like this. Later on, it should pay dividends, but I'm not 100% certain. If nothing else, I'm learning a great deal about TypeScript and how it wants to do typing. So this will be a practice, and I'm practicing TypeScript types, if nothing else. But it's frustrating, is what I'll say about that. So perhaps because of the frustration of the type system, uh, letting off a little bit of steam, I spent a great deal of this week just creating art, not necessarily focusing on the game. Once I started getting into the game engine and it started being more capable enough to produce interesting imagery, I sort of lost myself in it to some degree. I enjoyed it, and I just let myself go with it, and it's fun. It's just visually pleasing to create these pretty uh, motion graphics, if you want to call it that. Uh, NFT, perhaps NFT will become the word for these sorts of things, even though that means totally something different. But you could see this being an NFT or something like that. This is the sort of thing one creates for that sort of thing. And who knows? Maybe I'll get back into that. I created a few NFTs. Perhaps I'll get back into it. I don't know. Anyway, this was fun. This was the beginning, so this was more or less a demonstration of performance. So let me get out of that. You can see that this is running at 44 frames per second with 2,000 entities. Each of these entities is immutable. It's frozen from the JavaScript object.freeze perspective, and they're read-only from the TypeScript type perspective. And it works, and it works well. 2,000 with no gimmicks or anything behind the scenes. That's acceptable. And so that's quite impressive, I would say. So next, I did implement textures. I did implement textures. Me speak English not good. So I have textures now in the engine. Textures have to be cached. There's the texture and there's the image. Some people call the image the texture. Three.js has its own texture class. The three.js texture class has images. Oh, do I want to say associated with it? that's a good enough word. Images associated with the texture class. And so you could say that the texture has a texture within it, or textures. So that gets a little confusing with the terminology, but just know that I'm distinguishing these with by saying image whenever it's something like a canvas or PNG image, like image data sort of image bitmap, that sort of thing. I'll call an image or try to. And then the three.js texture is a texture. That's what I'm going to call a texture. So I had to create a cache for both textures and images. And maybe I'll show some of the code of the caching system. Or system is not even a good. It's not very complex, but it works well. It seems like I re-implement the cache quite often. I've gotten to the point now where I view caching as something that does need to be specialized for each implementation. There's really no such thing as a cache that one will always constantly reuse and go back to. I've over the months of this excuse me, of this adventure been trying to create a cache that would just work well everywhere. But I think at this point I'm kind of giving that up and just enjoying rewriting caches every time and just exploring that to some degree. So that's a lot of fun. This go around, I'm pretty sold that the keys to a cache really need to be serializable. And so I think that strings or numbers work well here. I'm using strings behind the scenes. I'm really I'll show you some of the code perhaps on that, but effectively what I'm doing is I'm just taking the JSON stringify of the object of the specification that's sent in to create these rendering objects. And that's what I'm using as the key to the cache. So far, so good. We'll see how it goes. Again, more pretty art. I think it looks good. Looks pretty. Looks colorful, right? I quite enjoy this. So the I kind of accidentally found this technique for kind of zooming in and out of frame like this. I'm not sure if it goes long enough to do another cycle, but you can see that the image is getting slowly and slowly larger. It will eventually get so large that it fills up the screen and goes away, and then it kind of restarts from the very small picket position. So the key to that is the tangent function, the math.tan function. Kind of neat. Yeah, looks pretty. Next up, some more art. Color drop, I call this one. Oh, no. This is color drop. I read. My show off software isn't perfect. I need to, I'm improving it every time. With every devlog, I note that I sort of begin my devlog by fixing the broken stuff that's broken because I'm relying on the same three.js module that I'm evolving quite rapidly with the game. And I kind of like the back and forth. I've decided that I like the two different projects depending on this module that's kind of rapidly evolving. It's a little bit of a pain in the rear, but each project has different needs and requirements. And on the whole, I think this makes the module stronger. So good stuff, I think. Anyway, looked at that long enough. Here's a pretty motion graphic. Hey, you wouldn't really call it a motion graphic, would you? I don't know. Whatever you want to call it. This looks pretty. You can just stare at this for hours, probably. I did stare at it for quite a while. As I was creating it, I stared at it, and then I just sort of spent probably, I'm not even going to say how long I spent just sort of looking at this because it's a never ending repeating, or it's a never repeating endless sort of cycle. here it's just the first 60 seconds, but it goes on forever. It changes. There's some interesting, what would I call it? It keeps it interesting. I found a good balance of all the different parameters at just the right levels to keep it visually interesting as it goes forward. So you can see here, this is where it starts off. It starts off with a bang, right? So looks pretty cool, I think. So yes. All right. Next up, some more art. Creative Spark. Again, just sort of playing with the shapes and colors. This time, the geometry is a random collection of three.js geometry. So this is something of a demonstration of the fact that I'm not just rendering cubes or boxes. This is a collection of torus knots and dodecahedrons and circles and all sorts of stuff. So that was a thing that I did. So I've generalized my mesh creation within the three.js wrapper module that I've created. So that was fun. I enjoyed that. So today was getting back into the game, or this was later on in the afternoon. Getting back into the game was quite enjoyable after doing mostly the art. So this is me showing off the keyboard control. So I now have motion in the way to move around the entity and the input system. And then here, which one's which? They both kind of look the same. Ah, here it is. This is actually showing off the physics. You'll note that as I move the cube around the screen, it sort of drifts a bit. And so what I'm doing is just applying forces with the keyboard WASD, and matter.js is doing its physics magic to update the position, and then I'm reading the position. So it's kind of interesting to think about. There's sort of a, again, this is the relative roguelike, and the reason I call it that is because of my great realization that each system is relative to the other systems. And here it's kind of interesting that the movement system and the physics system both need to read and modify the position, or at least modify, right? The movement system just needs to apply a force. The physics system needs to read that force and kind of uh, reset it in some sense, right? To say that I've accepted this input, right? The force impulse. I've accepted it. And so there's a communication between the systems. And so I haven't quite 100% wrapped my head around how best to do that. But solution that works for the moment. I'm happy with it. No collisions yet, because there's only one thing. That'll probably come later tonight or tomorrow, perhaps. But we started it. We got it done. A lot of fun this week. Let's take a look at some code here. See how that does. So let's take a look at this. This is what I'm looking at on the screen. Yes, all right. Roguelike relative study. Let's see if I can make that an appropriate size. Gotta figure out which way to scale the window so that it scales on the screen best. This looks good. All right. So start from the beginning. In the beginning, in the beginning of the beginning, there is, well, let's start here. Let's call this the beginning. Index.js. Index.js goes to app main. App main does nothing still, but goes to game main. Game main looks like this now. A lot of this is just the art messing around. All this stuff is just the art messing around at the top here. These two systems are just purely for art at the moment. I'm just, these are my test systems that have now become interesting art creation systems. This is the physics system that I created recently today. This is just creating the pool. So the systems and the pool creation are two different things. So this pool is just a collection of entities. This is the ticker, right? That just ticks along at whatever frames per second I want right now. Default is 60, so no real change on the ECS ticker. It all looks the same. Let's take a look at the physics system. No, let's take a look at the move system. That's the simpler. So there's the move system. It's a very simple system. I've another module that I extracted, let's call it, from my previous projects. Listen to keys and listen to mouse. So this is nice because it gives me a nice user interface. I just have to look at the keys. And let's see if I can go into some of the code. How this works. So it's not very complicated, but that's the beauty of it. Once this code looks very simple, right? It's very powerful. It essentially allows me to have a map that just allows me to capture the W key and do something with the W key whenever something happens. Oh, this is the mouse. I'm looking at the wrong one. How funny. All right, so this is the one that does the keyboard. You can see that they're very similar, the key and the mouse listening. But it's just simple thing. I actually do have a ticker, so this does look for request animation frame. So this is a game-friendly, real-time keyboard event and mouse event listener. And so that's a thing. You have to think about that a bit when you're doing games, how you handle input and so forth. I think there's lots of different ways of doing it. This is the way that I'm currently doing it. And so I essentially have an action that fires at some rate, and then I listen to that, and something happens. Here, the something that happens, right? That is out of scope, or it's this is a different system. So this is again a communication between two different systems. The way I'm handling the communication with the two different systems here is I have a state object that I update, and then for both the listening to the mouse and listening to the keyboard, I just have one state, left up, up left in. That's kind of what I got left with. Left is sort of left or right, up or down, and I've figured out that I don't need up or down. I just need one of those. I don't need left or right. I just need one of those, and the integer can be positive or negative, right? I don't need in and out. I can just do one of those. I could probably come with better names. The horizontal, vertical, and depth. I don't know what are we going to call it. But for now, I'll just leave it as is. Let's clean up some of the code as I'm going through here. Kind of see how this sort of got split apart. First it was this guy, and then I added the other guy. So this is how I'm doing fixed entities. Fixed, that's not a right word. Read-only, immutable. I call them fixed now. That's the way I think of them, because that's the type I created for that. When I say fixed, it just means that it's frozen object, or it's read-only from the TypeScript system, or it's immutable from the more general terminology. I like it. It seems to work pretty well. I still haven't. I'm discovering, let's call it, the patterns that I want to use for replacing parts of the immutable object. I'm not 100% happy with what I have right now, but it works to some degree. This replace function is kind of the key of it. It's a little bit complicated, I'd say. It's very compact in this form. What's that? Like 14 lines of code? 18 if you want to count everything. It works well to just replace a little bit of a map. At first, this was just for fixed objects. And then I just sort of realized that nah, it just works as a general replacer for an array. So there's probably a neat word for that, a neat functional word. I don't know what that is at the moment. So that is the move system. Let's go back in the game main. And we have the physics system. Now, does the physics go first or does the move go first? It really doesn't matter to some degree. It probably will matter later on. For right now, it doesn't matter because it'll just get caught on the next loop, right? It's an endless cycle. It's a circle, right? So where's the circle begin? Where's the circle end? That sort of thing. All right. So in the beginning, so this is our ticker, right? So this gets called every tick with the pool, and then it'll return a pool that it modifies or mutates. So there is still mutation even in an immutable system. It's just very cautious on how we do that. So this is the matter.js update the world function. It's wrapped in my module. You can see here I have my physics 2D module. Oh, I don't need that samples anymore. Let's get rid of that. I try to keep a tidy code base. So, and the way that I do that is to not stress about it too much, but clean up things as I see them. Just a continual gardening kind of approach or style. Just make it better every time I see it. So physics. I'll go into the physics module a little bit. So the way that I eventually worked out how to do that, for now at least, is what you see, right? I mutate the entity in steps is really what it really wants to be. And really a large part of this is just it's reducing the complexity, right? And so the way that I'm doing that is I have to keep these methods and so forth small. Every time I do a map, this should this almost certainly will become a function at some point. These 12 lines of code that I have highlighted here. But for now, as I develop, I sort of complicate it, and then I go back and I refine it. So this is a complicated version of this, right? I'll go back and I'll make it simpler. So you can see that there's a lot of repetition here, right? That wants to be a thing probably. Right? How do I how do I map and modify certain sections all in one? Then maybe this works out okay. Maybe getting it too complicated getting it too, what's the right word? Things can be too simple sometimes. Maybe that's a way of saying it. Update entity with physics body. So this is where I need to add the physics body if it doesn't already have it. So I have a physics body expression, which is the physics body ID expression, rather, which is just the physics body ID and a number, right? So it's serializable, it's immutable. Numbers are immutable in JavaScript or most languages. You don't want the value of one to go change it on you or something. So that's the key, let's call it, to the physics body. So I create a physics body. I create a physics body in my physics module. It gives me back an ID, which I can use later, right? That I return here, right? So I extend the entity with the physics body ID. I also add the body. So I have two different functions or methods here, for one for creating the physics body and then one for adding it to the world. This API it's a little clunky, I think. I don't know, I could probably make that a little better. I do think I want to keep these as two separate steps because this is what puts it into the physics world, right? So it could very well be that I want to take a body out of the physics world and maybe put it back in and take it in and take it out. So I need those to be two separate things, to create it and to add it to the world. So that's how I do that. Force, so this is how I apply forces. Again, this is overly complex, but I'm simplifying it every time. I love this assertion, right? I think it's especially when I sort of discovered in game development in particular, but I think just development in general, just having assertions every now and then that sort of signals that everything's sane is the way you expect it to be. It's not too bad, especially once you get bitten once or twice. It's better maybe just leave that. It's a very cheap sort of thing to have this assertion. Think of it as a runtime type check, right? The position expression. So I'm getting the position. I'm getting the force expression. Like I'm not thrilled with this syntax, right? Whether the way this looks, right? The one on the force, like that doesn't look right, but it works for now. I could also do param of force expression, and this would be the same thing if I do this. Force expression. Yes. So I do that. These are equivalent statements. So maybe that's a little better because it has a word. I don't know how I want to do that exactly. Maybe this one doesn't want to be an array. Maybe I want to make this an object. All right. With a name. Maybe that's just how it needs to be. Who knows? So we have the body ID that we're getting. We have the position. I apply a force, given the body ID, and the context of this is the physics context, right? Then I have the force, and then from where the force is being applied, which I'm just saying is the position of the body. So we could actually have that be somewhere else, but for this in this particular moment, that works best. And then you can see that I'm returning a force of 0, 0, 0. So I'm removing the force in some sense, right? I'm saying that I've applied it. And so this is the dance between the movement system and the physics system. So the movement system, right, is the one that creates the force, right? So we're creating it and we're destroying it over here. I don't like that. I don't like the communication between these two systems. I don't know of a way to get around it. Maybe there is no way to get around it. Maybe that's just the way it is. But it feels, especially as I'm kind of exploring this space, feels a little off. I don't know. Not entirely happy with it. Let's see. Update entity with physics position. So that's what it says on the 10 there. So we just need to reset the position of the entity. Again, this whose position, where, what. I'm not sure I like this name. Kind of a global thing for a thing everyone has an opinion about. But anyway, I'm using it for right now. And so this is the rendering position, right? This is the position that the rendering engine is going to use. But obviously it's the position that the physics engine is also updating. Perhaps I need to rename that the render dot position. Maybe I need to keep it as is. Who knows? So, how long have we been talking here? Half an hour. Boy, without the ums and ahs, it takes me a lot longer to get through this. I note that I also speak in a more calm tone. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that'll sound good. When I listen back, I'll see. Maybe I'll hate it. Who knows? All right. So that's that. Again, another assertion. I'll like get rid of that one at some point, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. But trust me, what I say that was undefined at some point. It really should not be. So I fix that. So that's effectively where we're at. And then this is my basic starter pool. Creates the cube that you're looking at on the screen. So red. Let's have a little fun here, right? So I can show you if I open up the browser. Yeah. So I can, let's see if I can do this both at once. If I shrink this down, what does that look like? Can I do that? I can, but I can't move it on the screen. Oh well, not a big deal. But I'll just do it real quick. Just to prove to you that this is working in real time. So that works. Did the thing, it blinked. And now we have a blue cube going on the screen. Just that simple. I love the immediacy of programming with JavaScript. It's just so nice. I was a Java developer for many, 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 many years. And the the dev loop with JavaScript is just so much better. I don't even think it has anything to do with project size, honestly. I mean, I did work on much larger projects when I was doing Java development, but that was more of an excuse than anything for why compile time should be long, because they really shouldn't. There's no need to have a compile time that's longer than 16 milliseconds, I would say. So that's that. I think let's get back into the browser. Two? Yeah, that looks pretty. So that's what I did this week. Mostly art, I would say. That's what I got lost in for a good period of time. It's addictive. It really is. Creating pretty things, right, to look at. Just visually pleasing. Maybe they carry some meaning, maybe they don't. Just art. Art in general is just kind of fun stuff. I enjoy it. I view game development as art. Just a more complicated version of it's like visual art that moves around and has mechanics and blah blah blah. Just a complicated version of these simple little shapes with colors and so forth. So it's all the same thing. At least that's the way I view it. And with that, I will bid you adieu until the next one. Perhaps I'll do another midweek one. Maybe I'll bundle them all up and we'll do a devlog next week. I'm posting more regularly recently to Instagram and Twitter and so forth. So if you want to follow me there, kind of enjoying it. Especially as I'm doing the art stuff. The Twitter, or I'm sorry, not Twitter. Well, Twitter, but Instagram mostly is the good place to post these fun little, just pure visual art pieces. Kind of enjoyable. Maybe I'll get into creating some more higher brow art with some meaning and so forth embedded inside of it. We'll see. It's all fun. Anyway, till next time, catch you guys later. Bye. Bye.